Hi, my name is Michelle, and I'm going to introduce you to our newest foods from our North Star Kitchens, Acana Classics. I'm going to explain the foods to you and also tell you how these foods are designed to help pet specialty retailers and pet lovers. I'll do that by using the package. The package is specifically designed to help you tell our story. So hopefully I can give you a few tips along the way to help you explain our foods to your customers. So what is Acana Classic Foods and why have we created them? Well, Acana Classics is a brand new category within the Acana line. It's 3 different foods: prairie poultry, wild coast, as well as classic red. And the value that they bring to pet specialists and pet lovers is it's a biologically appropriate food at a beautiful price point. So for example, prairie poultry, an 11.4 kilo bag, in Canada retails for $46.99. So this food allows retailers the opportunity to convert multinational or grocery customers to a specialty food. Acana Classics is also a full line of food. So meaning that not only do we have 3 recipes, we also have 5 different sizes within each formula. So from 340 gram right up to 17 kilo, there's plenty of variety to offer pet specialty retailers as well as pet lovers. So before we move on to the presentation from the bag and tell you a little bit about the foods, I want to show you a couple things that are fairly interesting. So you'll notice the blue tab on the bottom of the bag, as well as the blue gusset on the side. These are designed specifically to help pet lovers as well as pet specialty retailers navigate in the Acana line. So on the Acana Heritage bags, the regionals, as well as the singles, you'll also see different colors to identify the category the food belongs to. This is again just trying to make it nice and easy for you to find your formula on the shelf. It also offers great, beautiful merchandising. So now that we've talked a little bit about the food, let's move on to presentation from the bag. So best place to start with any of our foods is always to introduce the category. So the category of this food is biologically appropriate. It's not a premium food, super premium, or holistic food. This is the category this food belongs to. So what is biologically appropriate? Well, it's foods designed to match the eating anatomy. So a dog is a meat eater. So a biologically appropriate food for a dog is obviously focused on meat. So when speaking to pet lovers about feeding a meat eater, we always recommend that you use your meat math. So what is meat math? Well, meat math consists of what's called 3 meat questions: how much, how fresh, and how many. And so to talk a little bit about meat math, we always recommend that you use this panel here, or the pod here, to introduce meat math. So the first meat question is how much meat. So you'll see here that this food has 50% meat. So within its category, that's 2 times the meat inclusions compared to most pet foods, so a lot of meat. The second meat question is how much fresh. So you'll see at the top of the pod here, it says unmatched regional ingredients, fresh or raw. So clearly the focus is on fresh. So in all Acana Classic foods, we're using 1/3 fresh. How does that compare to most pet foods? Well, most pet foods in this category typically use little to 0 fresh. The third meat question is how many. How many is expressed in 2 different ways in the foods. And the number of animals that we use. So in the case of wild coast, we're using Pacific herring, arrow-tooth flounder, as well as silver hake. So 3 different types of animals. And how many is also expressed in what we call whole prey. Whole prey is superfood for dogs. It includes the meat, the organs, the bone, the cartilage. In the case of wild coast, we're using the whole fish. Now this is a key point of difference in this food. I don't know any other dry pet food that is using the whole fish. Most pet foods tend to use a lot of bone, very little meat. So the result of using whole fish is something that's much closer to nature and certainly a natural way to supplement your dog. So the 3 meat questions: how much, how fresh, how many. 50% meat, 1/3 fresh, and 3 different types of fish plus whole prey. So now that we've talked about the meat math using the pod, let's talk about the other percentages on the bag. So you'll see it says 50% vegetables, fruits, botanicals, as well as steel cut oats. So we use these ingredients because these are nice natural sources of vitamins, minerals, tonics. Notice that this food isn't grain-free. Whenever you're talking about Acana origin foods, we typically don't focus on grain-free, whether it is or it isn't. And the reason for that is because there's plenty of grain-free foods on the market today that aren't biologically appropriate. They tend to be quite low in protein, high in carbs, and typically high glycemic carbohydrates. Moving on to the 0%, it says 0 GMO ingredients, 0 glutens, plant protein concentrates. That's important in a pet food, as well as 0 potato and tapioca, which tends to be, again, high glycemic ingredients that are typically found in a pet food. So now that we've covered the pod, the key points of differences, let's move on to the bottom of the bag. So these icons here are specifically designed to help take you through our key points of difference. So the first icon here, the BA, represents this food is biologically appropriate. So that means it's protein rich and carbohydrate limited. The second icon, whole prey, represents us using, again, the whole animal. So we're using the meats, the organ, the bone, the cartilage. In the case of Wild Coast, we're using the whole fish. The G represents low glycemic. So we're using steel cut oats as a low glycemic ingredient, which is more healthful for a dog. So the FD icon represents freeze-dry infusions. Now this icon is important for retailers because this ensures that the food's not going to get returned. Freeze-dry infusions are a nice natural way to make the food palatable. So in the case of Wild Coast, we're using freeze-dry herring. The food's going to be nice and tasty and ensuring that the dog loves it. And the final icon at the bottom, the Canadian maple leaf, represents fresh local ingredients. So our mandate at Champion Pet Foods is Bufrino, and so our middle name is FRI, or Fresh Regional Ingredients. So this represents the ingredients that we're getting locally, a key focus at Champion Pet Foods. So now that we've talked about the front of the bag, let's move to the back of the bag. So moving on to the back of the bag, we'll start at the top right corner. Top right corner outlines our mandate, again, which is Bufrino, biologically appropriate, represented up here, fresh regional ingredients in the middle, and NO, never outsourced. So this bag does an incredible job of talking about BA, or biologically appropriate. So again, when we talk about BA, we need to use our meat math. So if you remember from the front of the bag, this food here has 50% meat. So we're going to use this panel here to talk a little bit about the meat math and go into greater detail. So the first meat question, again, of how much meat? 50% meat, that means the 6 kilo bag has 3 kilos of wild caught saltwater fish. A lot of meat, again, 2 times compared to most pet foods. Second meat question is how much fresh? You'll see here that it says 1/3 is fresh or raw. So a key focus of our food is to ensure that we're using the very best ingredients. We're using loads of fresh. Again, compared to most pet foods typically have little to 0 fresh. And the third meat question is how many, or variety. Variety is expressed in 2 different ways in the different animals that we use, as well as, again, whole prey. So in the case of Wild Coast, we're using whole herring, flounder, as well as hake. How many is also expressed in what we call whole prey. So again, we're using the whole fish, something that's quite different compared to most pet foods. And how many, as well as how much, is also expressed here in the quantities that you're getting of each individual fish. We think that this is something that makes our foods quite different and certainly gives pet specialists the opportunity to demonstrate to pet lovers that they are special. They've got really unique foods that you can't find at grocery stores or in mass box stores. So now that we've talked about the meat math in this panel, we've talked about BA, let's move on to the second piece of our mandate, which is fresh regional ingredients. And the best place on the bag to talk about fresh regional ingredients, we think is probably pretty obvious, but let's use this photo right here. So this is really a key point of difference of Champion Pet Foods. Most pet foods today, they buy commodity-based ingredients, so they never really know where their ingredients are coming from. In the case of Wild Coast, we're getting all of our saltwater fish from Celtic Seafoods from North Vancouver Island. So again, we're working with trusted local suppliers, something that we think is fairly important for pet lovers. So the final part of our mandate is NO, or never outsourced. So what that means is we make our foods ourselves and we don't make foods for anybody else. So we have our own kitchens, we have our own recipes, and we have our own trusted ingredient suppliers. And we believe that's important to control quality from beginning to end. And hopefully that gives pet lovers as well as pet specialty retailers peace of mind when recommending or feeding our foods. So hopefully you've enjoyed the video on Acana Classics. and good luck in presenting Acana Classics in your market.